Hello and welcome. If you were waiting for the moment when quiet technical policy becomes your everyday reality, well, here it is. Right now, we're witnessing the rollout of the most dangerous legislation for Australian citizens in living memory. Unheralded changes that landed with barely a murmur, tucked into dense technical language and deceitfully sold as tidy admin updates, not preceded by any prerequisite vote, no consultation or essential informed public debate, just a solid framework. And frameworks matter because they're the scaffolding you harness power to later on. Today we're unpacking the digital prison architecture rapidly going up all around us. Digital IDs, expanded financial monitoring, cross-sector data sharing, AI-driven decision-making, and why all of this, taken together, enables an unprecedented level of control over your life. On the surface, the pitch to politicians sounded reasonable. Streamline how government departments share data, reduce duplication, improve efficiency, cut fraud. Who's against better admin, right? But inside the turgid technical language sits something much bigger and infinitely darker. Expanded government access to private financial data via new smart digital frameworks. A legal route for cross-sector data sharing in certain cases without your explicit consent under what's described as recognised legitimate interests. An expanded scope for automated decision-making where AI systems make determinations that affect your benefits, your access to services, even your risk profile. A regulated framework for digital verification services. In other words, the foundational plumbing required to underpin a national digital ID system. On paper, we're told none of this forces a social credit system. And strictly speaking, that's true, but it does assemble the components needed to run one. Think of it like wiring a house and installing all the switches. Whether someone decides to flip them now or later is ultimately a political decision. But the wiring and power supply is set in place and ready. Most laws start with a public debate. This one began as a technical proposition to politicians, disingenuously framed as housekeeping. And when something is pitched as an efficiency update, it tends to slide right on through. The danger isn't in one isolated clause. It's in the composite effect of multiple systems being tied together. Identity, finance, access to services, AI-based determinations. Each might be manageable on its own. Tie them together under a single digital identity, and you're now living in a world where one decision, one profile flag, one automated trigger will ripple across your entire life. If you want to see how this kind of architecture is used, just look at China's social credit system. That didn't appear overnight. Again, it began as digital ID and data integration, similarly framed as efficiency, security, and financial inclusion. Over time, it became a mechanism to reward compliance, punish dissent, and control access to loans, travel, education, even internet use. And this isn't just a China story. There's an expanding globalist push for deeply integrated identity systems. Major institutions promote frameworks for reimagining digital ID, explicitly linking national identity schemes to banking, healthcare and public services. These proposals are aligned with broader agendas like digital transformation and Agenda 2030's sustainable development timelines. Whether you support those goals or not, the practical outcome is the same: a tighter integration of who you are, what you access, and how you behave, all captured digitally. In the UK, for example, the government has already rolled out forms of digital ID for accessing state services and administrative tasks. It's technically optional, but the list of things that become difficult without it keeps growing, such as renting a home, claiming benefits, even serving as a company director. Optionality over time becomes a pressure tactic. For clarity, some of the legislation discussed here, like the Police Crime Sentencing and the Courts Act, the Public Order Act, the Online Safety Act, the National Security Act and the CHIS Act, are UK laws, not Australian. But they're vividly instructive and deeply concerning. They show how, step by step, broad powers over protest, speech, surveillance and informant activity expand, and how digital infrastructure exponentially multiplies those powers. Here's the core concern for Australia. Once identity, finance and access to services are bound together under a digital profile, and once AI systems are allowed to make or influence determinations, then you've built a single point of control, a switch. And when a system has a switch, sooner or later, someone will flip it. Let's imagine a few scenarios. You attend an anti-government protest. Your account is quietly flagged as elevated risk. No one needs to arrest you. Maybe your transfers start getting delayed. Maybe your fuel purchases are limited this month due to a compliance review. You get an email with polite language and a link to appeal to a chatbot. You make what's deemed an unapproved purchase, classified by an algorithm as risky. Now, your ability to send money overseas is restricted until further verification. No police officer needed, no court order, just code and punitive policy. Your verified ID is tied to your online presence. Every post, donation, or subscription becomes traceable to your legal identity. You don't need outright censorship to silence people. You just raise the cost of speaking until most of us self-censor. This is how dissent gets flattened in the 2020s, not always with bans and battens, but with dashboards, nudges, and temporary restrictions that never quite lift. That's the promise: safeguards, oversight, proportionality, all good, all necessary, and all historically fragile when systems scale and coercive political pressure mounts. Here's the key questions we should be asking. Who operates the identity backbone, and under what statutory limits? What exactly can be shared across departments and sectors, and on what basis, without your consent? What forms of automated decision-making are allowed, and what's the process for challenging them? Is there a human in the loop with real authority? How is financial data classified, and how broad are the definitions of risk, harm, or security concern? What changes require fresh legislation versus a ministerial rule, a regulation, or a departmental guideline? What audit trails exist? And can citizens see their own data trails and flags? Because once these systems are expanded or combined with other laws, enforcing political or social compliance is effortless. The state doesn't need to knock on your door if it can simply close a few digital doors in front of you. And let's be honest, the Australian public was not meaningfully brought into any open debate about mandatory digital ID regimes. That idea didn't win hearts and minds, so we were purposely excluded. Instead, the architecture is hurriedly rolled out first. The pipes, the protocols, the permissions, with the option to turn up the dial later on. There's no central bank digital currency here yet, but when it arrives, it'll slot neatly into what's being built today. And when frustration and unrest grow, as they certainly will, under globalism's intensifying assaults, integrated digital control is a dangerously powerful lever. If you care about not sleepwalking into a social credit world, even a soft Western version of it, here are the early warning indicators. Expanding legitimate interest, exceptions for cross-sector data sharing, increased reliance on automated or AI-assisted determinations for essential services, optional digital ID that becomes practically necessary for more and more tasks, pressure from banks and major platforms to link accounts to verified IDs for safety, a normalisation of account freezes, payment delays or service throttling as compliance tools, reduced transparency around risk scoring, fraud flags, and content moderation tied to identity. Remember, none of these in isolation screams tyranny, but systems of control are about composition, not components. It's the way the pieces interlock that changes the game. We've been told this is about efficiency and security. Maybe parts of it truly are, but we should never confuse convenience with liberty or safety with silence. The critical question isn't whether a digital identity system can be made to work. It's who it ultimately serves and what happens when the quiet technical frameworks of today become the on-off control levers of tomorrow. If identity, finance, speech, mobility are governed by a single switch, then the unaccountable, anonymous identity who controls that switch controls you. And that's not a power any free society should concede to satanic globalist thugs under any circumstances ever. Thank you for watching.